Alright, so we're in the battery bay. So we're going to come in here and I'm going to take a look at how everything's doing and just make sure that we don't have any swollen cells or any loose connections. Just kind of a maintenance thing. So it's looking pretty good down here. I don't see anything obvious as far as like any cells that are swollen or anything like that. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and take off these covers and then wrap our tools in electrical tape, and we're going to go ahead and give each little bolt a torque and see if we can, if anything's loose or anything like that. So that's what we're working on right now. Alright, so I've started taking these off, and so far these look great. There is no oxidation on them or anything. So we did polish them and stuff before we ever put them in, but so far they look good. So I'm going to get my wrench and I'm going to wrap it in electrical tape, and I'm going to start just doing one row at a time, just checking all of these connections. Okay. Yeah, they've all been tight. Look good though.
Yeah, everything looks really clean. Don't see any corrosion or anything.
Can I get this one?
I think so. I think you might be able to get that one. Go a little more in. There. I think there's just one more.
Okay. And
that you can't get.
Right, I'll have to wrap a spanner.
Okay.
Alright, so we've got 1 of 6 done. We did the bottom one, and all of them were tight, except for 2, which I got just, the tiniest little turn on. So who knows if those were loose or not. It kind of felt like they were a good connection, but we'll see. So next we're going to work on this middle row, and I think it has a smaller nut, so I'm going to figure that out, but I have to cut all these off, and then we'll work on that. Okay, that's tight. Alright, these are the middle ones, and we've tightened them all up. We're doing it, we first did those, and now we're doing these. So those tightened all up. They felt good. So, and they look good. They don't look like there's any kind of oxidation or anything on them, so they all look like they're faring really well. So we're going to go ahead and cover this back up, zip tie it, and then we'll work on the next row. This is the 3rd row. It looks really good as well. So I've gone ahead and tightened each one of these. There was a few that were, I wouldn't call them loose, but they took just maybe like a 20th of a turn or so, just a tiny turn. So anyway, we're going to close this up, zip tie it up, and then move up to here, which is going to be a little more challenging to get to. So we'll see how that goes. Alright, these look pretty good too. So this is the middle row on the top layer. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but no signs of oxidation, just like the rest of them. So this row is good too. We just buckled that one up. So we're going ahead and putting a screwdriver on each one of these metal terminals and just making sure they're all tight. So far they've all been fairly tight, so we'll just continue to check them all and then we'll re-zip time. Alright, so this is the last row. It also looks great. So no signs of oxidation. These have been in here, I think 2.5 years, maybe even 3 years. I'll have to check. But no signs of oxidation. They look great. So I'm going to go ahead and put a wrench on all these, make sure they're all tight, and I hope, I think they'll be okay. Alright, so we checked the last row, and until that row, they had all been pretty tight. So that last row, though, it did have 2 cells where I was able to get maybe half a turn on a couple of them, which is more than I'm comfortable with. So it is worth checking them out if you have this type of cell, to periodically go in and tighten and make sure everything's okay. I didn't see any oxidation on any of it, so it all looked like shiny copper and metal, and it didn't look like there was an obvious source of heat. There wasn't any kind of discoloration or anything like that. The battery itself is cool, so it's, you know, well, it's hot today, but the battery is actually cooler than the outside temperature. So anyway, that'll do it for this kind of tune-up. So we'll get this AC mounted back in here. We're going to check out everything, make sure everything's okay. Everything looks fine from here. So we've swept up a little bit and we've redone everything. So now what we're going to do is we have a firmware update for our BMS that should put more information on our bus. So it will actually report individual cell balances, so we can start logging them and seeing if there's a trend somewhere. So anyway, we are done with this part, so we're going to go ahead and get everything buttoned up here. Alright, so today we're going to be testing out our battery capacity. So that's something we've never done, and there's been a couple things that have led us to question how much battery capacity we actually have. Our REC BMS actually uses a shunt, so you can see the shunt right here. So it uses this shunt to determine how much power is going in and how much power is going out. And normally that works really well, and it tells you how many amps are being drawn out, and therefore you can calculate the watts, and therefore you can get kind of a kilowatt hour capacity for how much power you've used and how much you've produced. So the thing is we've had a couple times where our battery will go to, say, maybe 40% or 50% and then drop to dead. Likewise, when it's charging, it'll charge up until it hits about like 80-some%, and then it'll jump to 100. And so we think that the capacity that we've programmed into the BMS is maybe a little optimistic. So we want to get a view of exactly what that full capacity is. So today what we're going to do is turn off the solar, turn off any input, and just run the battery down. We'll run it down to 0. We have protections put in place both with our Victron equipment and with the BMS that will prevent it from going too far, but we need to see how much battery capacity we have. Now, to help us with that, we also bought an additional monitor. So right here, we can see this little monitor here is just a simple monitor, but it uses a different way to calculate the energy passing through. It uses what's called a Hall effect sensor. So that's basically a set of coils that go around our main positive terminal, and it has the ability to read how much current is going in or out. So this Hall effect sensor will measure total amp hours coming in and total amp hours going in, out and in, and so it keeps track of how much power or amps are going in either direction. And so for us, we have a fairly large solar system or solar array, so we have 4,300 watts connected to this bus right now. And normally we can charge up to 100%, and it kind of just floats along all day. So really, we never really use the capacity of our batteries because our solar is quite large, and then through the night, our refrigerator, and we have security cameras and electrical systems in the bus that use up about right around 10% of the battery per night. So anyway, today we're going to go ahead and turn off the solar. So we have breakers in here that are dedicated for solar, and we can see here on our Victron panel that we have 1200 watts of solar coming in. It's about 9:30 in the morning, and our loads are about 600 watts. Now, it's cooled down quite a bit in Arizona. If we would have done this probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, I don't know if we could have gone the whole day, because we run typically 3 or 4 air conditioners inside the bus, along with power tools and a bunch of other stuff. So we'll see if we can get it drained today. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off now. So we'll turn off the panels, so here, and then we'll see our solar immediately drop to 0. So there's our solar now reading 0, and then here we see our little amp guy is now we're pulling 15 amps from the battery. So this little arrow right here indicates that it's coming from the battery. When it goes the other way, it means it's charging. So according to our BMS, we have about 83% battery left. So the way this counter works is it will go all the way to 0, and then as you keep drawing power, because there's no real way that I've found to calibrate this guy. As it goes to 0, it'll keep getting lower and lower and lower and lower. And so 0 is this like floor function. And so then when it starts to charge back up, it'll start adding amp hours to the 0. So it'll add amp hours. So our theory is if we drain it all the way down and then charge it all the way to 100%, we'll take a look at the meter and see how many amp hours it actually told us that that we have. So we to get it to drain to 0. So we've had to do a couple of things. Our BMS, we have our BMS programmed ultra conservatively, and so we want to get to a point where our lowest cell is 3.2 volts, and so we inadvertently had that set up to be 3.5 volts or something, so it shut off earlier. But we can see now that we're drawing about 40 amps from our battery. Our current voltage is 48.6, which is quite low, but we can see the countdown here on our amp hours. So currently it's at 0.68, 0.67, 0.66. It's this number here right below, and so we're showing basically 0% of our battery. And so what my theory is that when this gets to 0, it won't go negative. It just kind of moves the 0 point back and then uses that to calculate going forward. So what we'll do is we'll let this drain all the way down, and then we're going to pack everything up, take it home, plug it into the shore power, and let it fill all the way up. So let the battery charge all the way up, and then that number should then show up here at 100%. Oh, but here, there's 0. So there's 0 now, and we're still drawing 40 amps, and it's staying at 0. So that's what I thought would happen. That's what I hoped would happen, and that's what is happening. So I just wanted to verify that, and I wanted you guys to kind of see. I wasn't sure the way this worked. When I first put it in, I was like, how would this ever know? But what it is, it keeps setting 0 lower and lower. So anyway, we're going to keep our eye on this, and it should be shutting off relatively soon. We're down to, it shows 15%, and our highest cell voltage, or our minimum cell voltage is 3.32, and so we should be pretty close, because after it goes to 3.6, the charge curve on it goes really dramatically down. So with lithium batteries, initially it starts at about 4.2 or so, or 4.18, and then it dips really hard and then stays at about 3.8 for a very, very, very long time, and then at 3.6 it dips again, and the voltage drops off sharply as the current gets drawn, and that's what we're seeing here. So we're at 3.3 now, and again, this is still 0. It's still saying it's going to be 0, so that's good. So we'll let this drain down, and then we'll take it home and charge it up. Okay, we've gotten to 3.20, so we're at 3.2014 for our lowest cell voltage. You can see it right here. And so that's as low as we want it to ever go. So it did the correct thing. it shut everything down, and now there's an alarm going off. So I'm going to shut down the alarm by shutting everything down. And there we go. So now everything's off. So we're going to go ahead and drive it home. So this is what we had planned on anyway. And then we'll charge it all the way back up, and then we'll see where things are. All right, so we're back at home, and we've started charging with our shore power. So we can see now that our Victron is on. You can see the mains are on. That's the green light over there, and we're in bulk charge. We can also see that we're pushing in 50 amps from the shore power, and so we see this counter, which it was at 0, starting to go up. So it's now at 68, 69, 70 amp hours. And so when when it gets to full, when it thinks that it's 100%, it's on and ready, we should be able to see how much power we put in there. And so that'll give us a good indicator of kind of what type of capacity we have in our battery. So we'll just let this run kind of overnight. We're going to watch it and just kind of keep a close eye on things. But this is how it should work. We do see low battery flashing on the Victron, which is good. That's fine. That's exactly what we expect. We're putting charge back into the battery now, and like I said, we'll keep monitoring it, but the system is behaving as it should. Good morning. So our battery is finished charging, and as we can see, we have 275 amp hours went into the battery. Now that's at 55.6-ish volts. So that would be about 15.5 kilowatt hours, somewhere in there. When we did our calculations, if this battery were brand new and there was no degradation, everything was 100% performant, with our parameters in mind, because we keep some safety buffers on both the low end and the high end, just to keep it as safe as possible and to reduce wear on the battery. What we'd expect to see is, Michelle and I sat down and calculated last night, and we would expect to see around 18 usable kilowatt hours in this system. Now, 15.5, that's, it's quite a bit off. So keep in mind this battery is 7 years old. It was in a vehicle before it got to us, and so it had about 30,000 miles is what the little writing on the thing said. But that's the results that we got. What we did do is we kept a tally on the voltage drift between the highest and the lowest cell as it went all the way down and as it came back up. And obviously as it went lower and lower and lower, it started to drift apart a little bit more, but nothing that was outside of our safety parameters. And now as it's charged back up, we see now that we have a minimum cell voltage of 4.062 and a maximum of 4.066. So our voltage is only off by 0.004 volts. So that's pretty perfectly balanced. The temperatures all stayed within range. We kept a close monitor on temperatures. I did want to stay up till it finished, but it was like 2 in the morning and I just ended up going to sleep. So anyway, these are our results. We're going to have to sit down and do some calculations with them, but we wanted to share what the actual capacity of our battery was. All right, so armed with this new information, we now know that we have 275 amp hours or 15.5 kilowatt hours actual usable in our battery, we can now reprogram the BMS, tell it that that's the actual capacity we have, and we should see our percentages start to be a lot more accurate. So one thing that we have to do as a mental shift is, before all this happened, we would lose about 10% per night of our battery capacity due to the refrigerator running. The inverter itself draws power to keep itself running. We have a few fans. We have, like I said, the refrigerator, recorder, internet, a cell phone booster. All that kind of stuff is always running. Our locks are always running. So all those things overnight would drop the battery about 10%. So now we have to make a mental shift and be like, okay, they're going to drop about maybe 20%. And we have to kind of be okay with that, just because the monitor is going to be more accurate. So anyway, that's going to conclude our capacity testing for our battery. Everything appears to be in good health. All the cells stayed well within their voltage ranges. They were all very well balanced all the way down and all the way up. There was no major fluctuations in temperature. Everything behaved kind of like you expect. So we're going to go ahead and call this project done and move on to the next one.